It was 2:47 a.m. when the first call came through the county dispatcher. A neighbor, trembling and barely able to speak, reported hearing a woman screaming somewhere down Maplewood Drive, a quiet suburban street where nothing ever really happened. Officer Daniel Hurst was the first to arrive. His headlights cut through the fog as he slowed near the end of the cul-de-sac, where a small, two-story house sat half-hidden behind tall pine trees. The front door was ajar. A single porch light flickered weakly, painting everything in a... He called out, "Police. Is anyone inside?" But the silence that followed was so deep it almost felt alive. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of metal and something else, something faintly sweet, like perfume mixed with blood. The living room looked framed family photos on the mantel, a coffee cup half full on the table, TV paused on a late-night talk show. But then Hurst saw it, a dark trail leading from the hallway to the kitchen. He followed it, his boots sticking slightly to the hardwood floor. The trail ended at the edge of a shattered glass door that opened to the backyard, where the grass glistened with dew and something darker soaked into the soil. The detectives would later say they had never seen anything like it. The backyard looked like the scene of a struggle, yet no weapon was found, no footprints clear enough to follow. Only a woman's shoe, a single heel, broken at the stem, lay near the edge of the fence. There was no sign of forced entry, no stolen valuables, no clear motive. Whoever had come here had done it quietly, purposefully. They knew this house. Within an hour, the property was sealed off with yellow tape. Neighbors gathered in robes and slippers, whispering as blue and red lights flashed across their faces. Some said they'd heard an argument earlier that night, others claimed they saw a shadow near the woods behind the house. But there was no one to confirm it. The homeowner, 32-year-old Elena Marlowe, was gone. Detective Laura Briggs, known for her methodical calm, arrived just before dawn. She'd been with the department 15 years and had seen her share of violence, but something about the scene wasn't random chaos, it was orchestrated. Whoever had taken Elena had done so with precision. The security cameras on the street had been cut exactly 12 minutes before the neighbor's call. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. As the first light of morning crept over Maplewood Drive, the crime scene began to tell its silent story. Forensic techs moved carefully, marking blood spatter with small numbered tags, taking photographs in the cold grey dawn. Inside the kitchen, they found signs of a struggle, a broken plate, a torn sleeve from a blouse, and beneath the table, a faint handprint in blood.
Secure the
It was
area
small,
around the table.
almost
We have a partial
delicate.
print.
Elena's. By 6 a.m., her
Mr. Marlowe,
husband,
I'm
Ryan
Detective
Marlowe,
Briggs.
arrived
We need to
home
talk.
from an overnight The moment he saw the police cars, he froze. "Where's my wife?" he asked, his voice trembling. When Detective Briggs told him they didn't know yet, he sank to his knees on the driveway. "She was supposed to call me when she got home from her sister's," he whispered. As the sun rose higher, the media began to swarm. "Missing woman on Maplewood Drive," the headlines would read later that day. But within the walls of that house, detectives already suspected this wasn't just a missing person case. The evidence, the silence, the preparation, the timing suggested something far more sinister. And as Briggs stared at the empty space where the backyard met the dense woods, she had a gut feeling that this was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, in the quiet morning mist, the person responsible was. By the time the sun was fully up over Maplewood Drive, the Marlowe residence had become a maze of evidence markers, camera flashes, and quiet murmurs between detectives. Neighbors peered from behind curtains, half curious, half afraid. Detective Laura Briggs stood on the front lawn, her notepad open, her expression unreadable. She had worked dozens of missing person cases, but the details here didn't add up. Elena Marlowe wasn't just gone, she'd been taken, and whoever did it had planned every second. The first strange clue came from the house's security system. The cables at the side panel hadn't been yanked or broken, they'd been cleanly severed with a precision tool, like a wire cutter used by professionals. No fingerprints, no smudges. The forensic tech confirmed that the power cut occurred exactly at 2:35 a.m., 12 minutes before the 911 call. Whoever did it had been watching the house for days, maybe weeks. Briggs sat with Ryan Marlowe in the living room, trying to keep her tone steady. He looked dazed, still wearing his hospital scrubs, his hands trembling around a cup of cold coffee. "Mr. Marlowe," she said gently, When was the last time you spoke to your wife? Last night, around 10. She texted me she was leaving her sister's. Said she'd stop for gas, then head home. Did she seem upset? Nervous? Did anyone follow her? No, he said, shaking his head. She was fine. She sent me a picture of the gas receipt at 10:34. Then nothing. That timestamp, 10:34 p.m., would become the cornerstone of the investigation. Elena's car, a white Honda Civic, was later found 3 miles away at a rest stop off Highway 42. The driver's door was unlocked. Her purse was still inside, phone missing, keys gone. The last person to see her alive was a gas station clerk who remembered her buying a bottle of water and smiling politely before leaving. She didn't look scared, the clerk told detectives. She looked normal. Briggs ordered a full canvass of the area, door-to-door interviews, security footage from nearby intersections, and traffic cam analysis. But the cameras told a frustrating story. Elena's car was seen entering the highway, then vanished. No footage of her exit, no sign of pursuit. It was as if she'd driven straight into the dark and disappeared. By mid-afternoon, the missing persons unit was working in overdrive. The media was already circling, reporters shouting questions across police tape. Is this connected to the Lakeview abductions? One asked. Briggs ignored them. The last thing she needed was panic spreading. Back inside, she revisited the crime scene. Something about the living room bothered her. The coffee table had a small glass vase inside it, 3 fresh lilies. According to Ryan, Elena had bought them the day before. She always put them there when she was happy, he'd said. But there was something odd. One of the flowers had been cut shorter than the others, as if someone had deliberately trimmed it down. Briggs made a note. Symbolic gesture? Personal message? The forensic report arrived at 5:40 p.m. Blood found near the kitchen door matched Elena's DNA, but there was another partial print, not belonging to her or Ryan. A man's print, smudged but distinct enough to show a deep scar on the index finger. It was logged into the national database for comparison. No immediate matches. That night, Briggs sat in her car outside the Marlowe house, writing her report under the glow of the dashboard light. Something about this case gnawed at her, the precision, the silence, the way everything seemed staged. And then she remembered something Ryan had said earlier, almost in passing. She'd been getting weird calls lately. Unknown number. She thought it was a scam. Briggs replayed that sentence in her head. Unknown number. Weeks of preparation. A crime executed with surgical precision. This wasn't random. Someone had studied Elena, learned her habits, her route home, her husband's schedule. This was personal. At 9:15 p.m., Briggs's phone buzzed. It was dispatch. Detective, you need to see this, the voice said. We pulled surveillance from a convenience store 5 miles from the rest stop. About 30 minutes after Elena's car was found, Briggs drove straight there. The footage, grainy and distorted, showed the parking lot under harsh fluorescent lights. A man in a hooded jacket stood near a payphone. His face was partially hidden, but something about his stance was deliberate, too calm. He held something small in his hand, a woman's cell phone case, floral pattern. Elena's. The man made a short call, then walked out of frame. The timestamp, 3:12 a.m., less than half an hour after the neighbor's 911 call. Briggs stared at the screen, her pulse steady but her thoughts racing. Whoever this was, he wasn't just involved, he was in control. And the call he made that night, it wasn't random. It was to the Marlowe house. But the phone never rang. The next morning, the precinct was buzzing. Detective Laura Briggs sat at her desk, coffee untouched, eyes fixed on the blurry still image from the convenience store camera. The man in the hood had stood there for less than 40 seconds, but every frame felt deliberate. His posture was calm, too calm. No panic, no hesitation. He knew exactly what he was doing. The timestamp read 3:12 a.m., and the number dialed from that payphone matched the Marlowe residence. But when technicians checked the call logs from the house, something didn't make sense. The line had been disabled, physically cut from the outside junction box. That meant the call had gone nowhere. It was made for show. Briggs leaned back in her chair, running a hand through her hair. He called knowing it wouldn't connect, she murmured. So who was he performing for? Across the room, her partner Detective Hale looked up from the caseboard, where photos of Elena, Ryan, the crime scene, and the highway map were pinned in an intricate web. Maybe he wanted to be seen, Hale said. You said it yourself, this wasn't sloppy. Maybe he wanted us to find that footage. That thought sent a chill through Briggs. It wasn't the first time she'd seen criminals crave attention, but this felt different. This wasn't about fame or power, it was control. Every move the suspect made seemed calculated to lead them one step forward, while hiding something far bigger under. The phone records showed the call lasted exactly 14 seconds. No words, no background noise, just static. Forensic audio analysts enhanced the sound, isolating faint tones beneath the hiss. What they found was subtle, almost imperceptible, a rhythmic tapping, 3 beats, pause, 2 beats, pause, repeated twice. Some kind of code. Or maybe just the rattle of the payphone's metal cord. Briggs wasn't sure, but something about that pattern stuck in her mind like a splinter. By noon, Briggs and Hale drove out to the convenience store to get a feel for the layout. It sat at the edge of town, surrounded by empty fields and one flickering streetlight. The store manager, an older man with tired eyes, said he remembered the customer. Yeah, he came in just after 3. Didn't buy anything. Just stood by the phone. Thought he was waiting for someone. Did you see a car? Briggs asked. Yeah, the man said slowly. There was a black SUV parked by the dumpsters. Engine running. Couldn't see the plates. The detectives walked around the back. The ground was soft with mud, tire treads still faintly visible. Hale crouched, brushing the dirt away with a pen cap. Patterns deep, he said. He was here for a while. Briggs felt her gut tighten. Whoever this man was, he'd been watching Elena's car, maybe even following her, long before anyone realized she was in danger. Back at headquarters, analysts finally retrieved partial data from Elena's missing phone. The signal had pinged once, briefly, at 3:18 a.m., 5 minutes after the call from the payphone, from a cell tower near a forested area known locally as Blackwood Trail, a remote stretch of old logging roads about 10 miles north. The signal then vanished completely. Briggs and Hale drove there immediately. The road to Blackwood was narrow, twisting through thick trees. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. Even the air felt heavier. At the trailhead, they found fresh tire tracks, the same deep tread pattern seen behind the convenience store. Half a mile in, the forest opened to a clearing. There, hidden behind brush, was something that froze both detectives in their tracks: Elena's cell phone, lying face down in the dirt, its screen cracked, still faintly glowing. On it, a voicemail icon blinked. The message was time-stamped 2:36 a.m., 1 minute after the power lines to the Marlowe house had been cut. Briggs pressed play. The sound was faint, distorted, but Elena's voice was unmistakable. If anyone finds this, please, he's not who you think he is. A gasp. A struggle. Then silence. Briggs replayed it again and again, her pulse thudding in her ears. He's not who you think he is. The sentence echoed like a curse. Who was she talking about? Hale whispered. Briggs didn't answer. Her mind was already running through the list: the husband, the family, the co-workers, the neighbors. Elena had no known enemies, no debts, no criminal connections. But that message, that desperate warning, changed everything. When they returned to the precinct that night, Briggs called Ryan Marlowe in for another interview. He looked worse than before, eyes hollow, hands shaking. "Detective," he said quietly, "have you found her?" Briggs stared at him for a long moment. "We found her phone," she said. "And a message." Ryan's face went pale. "Message? From her?" "Yes," Briggs said softly. She said, "He's not who you think he is." "Do you know what she meant?" Ryan swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "No. I swear I don't. But I think I know who might." Briggs leaned forward. "Who?" Ryan hesitated, looking toward the dark window, as if afraid the night itself was listening. A week before she disappeared, he whispered, Elena said someone from her past had found her again. Detective Laura Briggs didn't speak for several seconds after Ryan's words. Someone from her past had found her again. The phrase lingered in the air like smoke, heavy and unsettling. What do you mean by that, Ryan? She finally asked, keeping her voice calm. Ryan rubbed his face with trembling hands. She told me she'd been getting these strange messages on social media about 3 weeks ago. At first, they were harmless old photos, a few lines like, "Remember me?" She thought it was a prank. Then the tone changed. The last message said, "You can't hide forever." That's when she blocked the account. Briggs frowned. Did she tell you who it was? She didn't want to, he said quietly. Said it was someone from before we met. From her old life in Seattle. That was the first time anyone had mentioned Seattle. Elena had lived there nearly a decade ago, long before moving to Maplewood with Ryan. Her records from that period were clean, no criminal history, no legal trouble, no restraining orders. But when Briggs requested Elena's archived employment records, something caught her eye, a 2-year gap in her timeline, from 2012 to 2014. No job history, no address listed, no digital footprint. Could she have changed her name? Hale asked later that evening, when they were reviewing files in the operations room. Briggs nodded slowly. It's possible. That would explain why the trail goes cold for 2 years. But why change her identity? What was she running from? By morning, the cybercrime unit had traced the blocked social media account. It had been created only 4 weeks before the disappearance. The username was Mercer Still Remembers, the kind of name that sent a shiver down Briggs's spine. The account had sent Elena a total of 12 messages, each growing more personal, more threatening. The last one read, "You took everything from me. Now it's my turn."
Mercer.
The IP address led to a rental property 2 towns over, registered under the name Jonathan Mercer. The name appeared once in Elena's past, buried in an old police report from Seattle, dated 2013. The report detailed a domestic disturbance call involving Elena and Mercer, described at the time as her fiancé. No arrests were made, but the report noted visible signs of fear and emotional distress on Elena's part. Briggs felt her stomach twist. He found her, she whispered. After all these years, he found her. They moved fast. A warrant was issued for the property in Pine Hollow, where Mercer was believed to be staying. When Briggs and Hale arrived with the tactical team, the place was eerily quiet. A single-story cabin surrounded by overgrown brush, windows covered with newspaper. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with dust and cigarette smoke. The walls were lined with photographs, not of Mercer, but of Elena. Dozens of them. Some recent, some clearly taken from a distance, as if he'd been following her for months. There were maps of Maplewood Drive pinned to the wall, her work schedule printed out, and a small corkboard titled Reunion. Briggs felt her pulse quicken as she scanned the room. On the table, she saw a stack of letters, all addressed to Elena but never sent. Each began the same way, "You promised you'd come back." The team found no sign of Mercer himself, but they did find one thing that turned the investigation on its head: Elena's missing keys, sitting neatly on the kitchen counter. "This isn't random," Hale said, his voice low. "He's taunting us." Briggs nodded. "Or he's close." Back at the precinct, they dug deeper into Mercer's background. He had no recent employment, no family nearby, and no digital trace since 2014, the same year Elena left Seattle. But one record stood out: a hospitalization at a private psychiatric facility just outside Portland, where he'd been treated for obsessive attachment disorder following a violent breakdown. He was released 3 years ago. No known address since. The pieces were beginning to fit together, but still, something felt off. If Mercer was the one behind Elena's disappearance, why had he waited almost a decade to find her? Why now? That night, Briggs stared at the crime board, her eyes tracing the red string connecting names, dates, and places. Elena's voice echoed in her head, "He's not who you think he is." She thought she finally understood what Elena had meant, until Hale walked in holding a file that changed everything. "Laura," he said, setting the papers down. "We just got Mercer's DNA results back from the cabin. It's a match to the partial print we found at the Marlowe house." Briggs nodded slowly. "So he was there." "Yes," Hale said. "But that's not all." He hesitated, his expression darkening. "There's another sample. Different profile. And guess who it matches?" Briggs froze.
Who?
Hale looked up at her. Ryan Marlowe. The precinct conference room was silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Detective Laura Briggs sat across from Ryan Marlowe, a file spread open in front of her like a weapon. Ryan's hands were cuffed loosely to the table, his wedding ring glinting under the fluorescent light. He looked pale, drained, but calm, too calm for a man whose world was collapsing. Ryan, Briggs began, her tone measured, we ran the DNA from the scene again. It came back with 2 matches, Jonathan Mercer's, and yours. Ryan blinked slowly, confusion flickering across his face. Mine? That's impossible. I wasn't even home. You said you were working the overnight shift, Briggs said. We verified that. You clocked in at the hospital at 11 p.m., but you clocked out at 1:17 a.m. Ryan's throat tightened. I told the nurse I felt sick. I went to my car to rest. Briggs leaned forward. Your car's GPS shows you left the parking lot at 1:23 a.m. You drove toward Maplewood Drive. You were less than a mile from your house at 2 a.m., 47 minutes before your neighbor called 911. The color drained from Ryan's face. He lowered his head, whispering, I just wanted to see her. I thought maybe she was lying to me. Lying about what? He looked up, eyes glossy with fatigue and guilt. About him, Mercer. She told me she'd been getting messages, but she said she blocked him, that it was over. Then I found a letter, hidden in her nightstand. It wasn't old, Laura. It was dated 3 months ago. She'd been writing to him. Briggs's stomach tightened. You're saying she was in contact with Mercer? Ryan nodded. She said she was trying to end it properly, to make him stop following her. But the letter, it didn't sound like someone trying to end things. It sounded like someone who still felt guilty. He reached for the folder, but Briggs pulled it away. So you went home that night? Yes, he admitted. I just wanted to confront her. I wasn't angry, not at first. I saw her car missing and panicked. I waited inside, but she never came back. The lights flickered, then went out. I called her phone again and again, but it went straight to voicemail. I swear, I left before anything happened. Briggs watched him closely. And Mercer? I didn't even know he was here until you told me, Ryan said, tears welling. If he took her, then he's been close for weeks. Maybe she knew, maybe she was trying to protect me. Briggs studied his trembling hands. Everything about his story sounded rehearsed, just credible enough to be true, yet something still didn't fit. If Ryan had been at the house, why had there been no sign of forced entry, no sign of Elena's return? And why had Mercer's DNA been found alongside his? She motioned for Hale, who entered with a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a small silver locket, its chain broken, its surface scratched. Briggs set it on the table. You recognize this? Ryan stared at it, eyes widening. That's Elena's. She never took it off. It was found in your car's trunk, Briggs said quietly. He shook his head violently. No. No way. You have to believe me, someone planted it. Briggs didn't answer. She opened the locket and slid it across the table. Inside was a tiny photograph Elena and Mercer, taken years ago. But on the other side was a newer photo Elena and Ryan on their wedding day. 2 worlds pressed together, as if someone had forced them to collide. It was hers, Ryan whispered, his voice cracking. I didn't even know she still had that old photo. Briggs stood, crossing her arms. You're telling me you didn't confront her that night, didn't see Mercer, didn't lay a hand on her, but somehow both of your DNA ended up at the scene, and her locket ended up in your car. Ryan was silent. His jaw tightened, eyes red. Finally he said, because I found it there outside our house when I came home that night. The door was open. I heard something move in the backyard, then a shadow by the fence. I thought it was her. I called her name, but no one answered. I found the locket in the grass, picked it up, and left. I was scared. Briggs leaned in. Scared of what, Ryan? He looked at her and whispered, because I heard him. Mercer. He was there. I heard his voice. Hale and Briggs exchanged a glance. If that's true, then Mercer's still out there, Hale said. Ryan nodded, his eyes haunted. "You don't understand. He doesn't just follow people, he studies them. He makes you see what he wants you to see." Briggs took a slow breath. She'd heard a lot of stories in her career, but this one felt different, like a trap closing in from both sides. If Ryan was lying, he was a master at it. If he was telling the truth, then they were dealing with a predator who understood fear better than anyone. As they escorted Ryan back to his holding cell, Briggs stood at the window, watching rain blur the city lights. Her reflection stared back, tired, unsure, but certain of one thing: this wasn't just a missing person case anymore. It was a game. And somewhere out there, the man who started. The rain didn't stop for 2 days. The sky hung low over Maplewood as if the whole town was holding its breath. By the time the storm cleared, the search for Jonathan Mercer had become one of the largest coordinated manhunts the county had ever seen. Every available officer, drone, and canine unit was deployed across the northern woods and abandoned properties. Mercer had left behind no phone, no wallet, no car, just fragments of a life meticulously erased. Detective Laura Briggs hadn't slept in nearly 30 hours. She stood in the operations center surrounded by screens, satellite imagery, vehicle movement data, call records. Mercer's face stared back from every wall, mid-40s, short dark hair, light scar under the eye. On paper, he looked ordinary. In reality, he was a ghost. The first lead came from a traffic camera 3 towns over, time-stamped 4:02 a.m. the night Elena disappeared. It caught the faint outline of a black SUV, same model seen outside the convenience store, turning off onto an unmarked logging road. The plates were missing, but a sticker on the rear bumper matched one from Mercer's old vehicle registration. Briggs and Hale followed the route the next morning. The air was damp, heavy with pine and decay. If he's hiding out here, Hale muttered, he picked the perfect place. The road ended at a decaying sawmill, long abandoned and half swallowed by the forest. Rusted machinery sat in silence, streaked with moss and rainwater. On the floor near the entrance, they found muddy footprints, 2 sets. One large, one small. Briggs crouched, tracing the smaller print with her gloved hand. "Female," she murmured. She was here. The interior of the mill was a maze of shadows and rusted catwalks. Briggs's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a makeshift camp, sleeping bag, canned food, a small notebook resting on a crate. The first page was filled with numbers and dates. The second contained a name, Elena. Over and over. But what chilled Briggs most was the final entry. "She still believes I'm dead. Tonight, she'll remember." She closed the notebook slowly, feeling the weight of the words. Mercer hadn't been trying to find Elena for closure, he'd been preparing for revenge. Crime lab analysis confirmed Mercer's fingerprints on the notebook, along with faint traces of blood. The match came back to Elena. That discovery transformed the investigation from a search into a race against time. By midnight, Command had set up a perimeter across 50 miles of forest. Helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights cutting through the black canopy. Every officer carried a photo of Mercer. The news channels were relentless, fugitive ex-fiancé linked to Maplewood abduction. The story had gripped the nation. But while everyone hunted for Mercer in the woods, Briggs couldn't shake a nagging thought. What if he wasn't running from them? What if he was leading them away from something? She returned to the cabin at Pine Hollow, retracing their steps. The air inside still smelled faintly of smoke and iron. As she studied the wall of photos again, she noticed something she'd missed before: a gap, a square of cleaner wallpaper where one photo had been removed. Beneath it, faint indentations from pushpins formed a word: mirror. Briggs called Hale immediately. "Check Elena's phone data again, specifically image files." Minutes later, he called back. "You're not going to believe this," he said. The last photo taken on her phone, timestamp 2:34 a.m., is a reflection. She's in her living room, taking a selfie in the mirror. But behind her, there's someone else. Briggs froze. "Who?" Hale hesitated. "It's blurry, but the outline, it looks like Mercer." But there was more. When digital forensics enhanced the reflection, another faint figure appeared, partially obscured, standing in the doorway behind Mercer. Briggs's voice dropped. "Don't tell me it's Ryan." "I don't know," Hale said quietly. But it's definitely not just one intruder. There were 2 people in that house before she disappeared. The revelation hit Briggs like a physical blow. All this time, they'd been chasing Mercer as the prime suspect, but what if the truth was far more complicated? What if Mercer hadn't kidnapped Elena alone, or at all? The next morning, a hiker near the river called 911 after spotting a half-submerged black SUV. The plates were missing, but the VIN confirmed it was Mercer's vehicle. The driver's door was open, no sign of struggle, but in the passenger seat lay a blood-stained jacket, tagged with a hospital name badge, Dr. Ryan Marlowe. Briggs felt her pulse spike. He lied to us, she whispered. He's not the victim. He's part of this. The forensics team worked through the night, pulling fibers, blood samples, and fingerprints. One sample on the steering wheel matched Mercer. Another matched Ryan. But the third came back as unknown female. Briggs stared at the report long after the room had emptied. If the third print wasn't Elena's, then someone else had been with them, someone still unaccounted for. And somewhere deep in those woods, Mercer's final message still waited to be found.